You ever been in a Dynasty League and the activity level, the participation level just isn't really that high across the league? In particular, there's a handful of managers, let's say, or half the league that isn't really making trades, and it's kind of making the league stale and stagnant, taking the fun out of it for you. This is actually a question that I had asked to me as far as what can you do to combat this, or how do you go about this when you see this in your leagues? I want to go over this topic with you. I think it's a really good one to discuss right now in particular this time of year. What are the peaks and valleys? Like, when do trades typically happen in your leagues, and when are some downtimes kind of to set for yourself as expectations? But then ultimately, I do want to go over some things that have worked for me and some ways that you definitely can really get your league kickstarted as far as activity to try to get everybody in your league a little more active. I'm going to actually give you some real examples that I've done in my leagues to show you how this can work for you. But before we get into all that, you already know what time it is. Stand up. Let's tuck them, man. Tuck these damn shirts in. Stop yapping. It's time to eat. All right, so let's get straight into this here. When it comes to trading in general, or this topic here of the activity level in my league kind of feels low, or that not that many people are trading in my league, one of the things that I think is often overlooked and oftentimes I have to remind myself of is that in trades in general, or trading, timing is key when it comes to trades. Not just in your league, but with individuals or managers that you're going to trade with. Some trades need to be on their time, or when they see a trade needs to happen for their team. Some people are more reactionary traders. They're not going to make a trade when they don't see a need to do so today. And the reason I think this is also so important to talk about right now is we're getting to the later part of May. We're going to go into June and July. And I want to talk about the Dynasty calendar and the trading cycle as far as what's realistic and what typically happens in leagues and when are trades actually made. I want to give a shout out to Koopa Troopa from South Harmon, who did a podcast really going over a lot of the dynamics and the numbers of this in particular topic. Now, for you to pull up a 12-month calendar, the entire year, from early September, when week one of the fantasy football season starts, through the end of the calendar year, we don't even get to January. The end of December is when the fantasy football championship takes place. So you're looking at about a 4-month window out of 12 months where there's actually points being scored in people's teams and players are being affected that people have to set lineups for on their rosters. That leaves an 8-month window in which no points are being scored. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind when I go through this trading cycle. And that's why you can clearly see some of these big peaks and valleys when it comes to the Dynasty trading cycle. Now, in the early part of the calendar year, while fantasy football has stopped, a lot of people are still really tapped into the NFL as the NFL playoffs are happening and obviously into the Super Bowl. But then once the football season finishes in early February, there's a big lull as far as Dynasty trades go. And that kind of takes us to the NFL Combine, which is at the end of February. So if we use that as a baseline for late February around the NFL Combine, in Sleeper on that platform in Dynasty Leagues, there's about 2,500 trades taking place in a day. Now, from that point of the NFL Combine in late February all the way through the NFL Draft time, which this year took place at the end of April. But when we get to the week after the NFL draft. See, the reason I want to use that as a guide is because if you think about it beforehand, while there are some things that are getting exciting, you can kind of project the class as far as talent goes, it's a lot of incomplete information. So unless you're in a league where you're drafting the rookies before the NFL draft, there's really not a lot of reason for people to necessarily make big moves on their team, and they don't even have enough information to go off of on the rookie class to really feel solid about making a lot of trades. Now, after the NFL draft takes place and this information becomes complete with landing spots and draft capital, there is a massive surge in trades typically across Dynasty Leagues. So trades take place at 7 times the rate, which you've been used to seeing from February to April there. And that is such a massive difference. So if you think about that in general, that means that in May, there's going to be a ton of trading. And it doesn't just sharply go down after, that 1 week of the NFL draft. Typically, people are in conversations, and a lot of these trade talks continue throughout May. Now, we're getting to the later part of May, and people at this point, we've seen so much happen and excitement take place in our Dynasty Leagues, right? You've had the rookie draft. You've had a bunch of trading and activity pop off in your leagues. And now at this point, in general, across a lot of leagues, you're going to start to see the activity level really taper off. It starts to slow down here at the end of May, and then into June, and then in July, it continues to go down. And in July, you hit the low as far as the least activity in general taking place across Dynasty Leagues at that time, because there's just not a lot going on at that point, right? Nothing's really happening on the field for any of these players, obviously, right? It's a lot of conjecture. So the trading typically does go down because people feel content. They can look at their roster and say their team is complete. There's not necessarily reasons to be making a ton of moves at that point. Then when we get into August, we start to see it build back up a little bit. And when we look across Dynasty Leagues, in-season trading, let's call it, right? So from September to December, we're looking at 5 times the amount of trading. So now that we got the Dynasty trade cycle discussion out of the way, what do you actually do? How do you get people to trade when your league is stale or during some of these stale periods? periods. And let's talk about this as the first thing. There are so many different people playing this game of Dynasty, and there's so many different ways in which people trade and value their team accordingly. Right now on the Sleeper platform, there are currently 830,529 people playing in at least one Dynasty league. That's a ton of different managers and a ton of different styles and ways that people are going to approach and play the game. People are going to be looking at their roster, and they can tell themselves any type of story they want to about their roster, that it's good to go, it's ready to go, and that the players on their team are going to be great players this season. There's no actionable data, there's no scoring on the field, which is going to make them go up and down as far as valuing these players accordingly. They're likely going to be more content to stay where they're at. And if you think about trading, and most managers in general as well, what do we know? Most people do not want to lose a Dynasty trade, and a lot of people at this time of year are more afraid of making a trade which is going to hurt their team. So they may just stay away from trading in general because they don't want to make a losing trade. They don't want to have to look back and say, why did I make this stupid trade when I didn't even need to in the first place? So if you're looking at your league and you're saying, man, I really wish the activity level was higher in this league, or I wish some of these managers would trade at a higher rate than they are currently, it's not going to just fix itself very likely overnight or by somebody else's doing. You're going to need to be the catalyst when it comes to making this happen in your league. A catalyst makes or accelerates a chemical reaction without being consumed in the process. So in order to do that, you're not going to be able to get away with just offing your junk or excess that you don't care about, that you would love to move, to people that are not trying to make trades right now and think that that's going to be the way that it gets done. You're going to have to offer trades to people and present them with offers which are going to make them strongly think about taking it today when they don't have to make a trade. And now in order to actually present them with that type of an offer, you have to have an understanding of what they want. Now, if you just send out a whole bunch of blind offers, you may get lucky and land on an offer which somebody does feel like is in their best interest, and they in turn take that offer. However, that's really not going to give you a very good chance of replicating that over and over. So if you want to understand the totality of how to do this, you're going to have to really think about it from their lens, and not just that, probably get information from them on how they view their players and their teams accordingly. So the question that I'm asking myself about the people that I'm trying to present these offers to really get this kickstart going, what are they looking to do with their team? What are they wanting out of this offseason, or how do they want to improve their team? If you think about it from that lens and you start actually getting information, whether it's in DMs or just casual conversation with them, maybe there's something that they want, a specific position that they need to upgrade or they need to address, that they feel like they have a hole on their team. Maybe they want to acquire a specific position. Maybe they want to get another quarterback. Maybe they actually do want to acquire at this time of year a running back. Maybe they want to get another receiver for their repertoire of receivers, or maybe they right now don't really feel the greatest about their tight end spot, so they want to get a tight end. Maybe they're looking at their team and they think at a specific position they need a positional upgrade, so they're willing to package one of their receivers to go higher at the receiver position, or a tight end, a running back, quarterback, whatever it is. Maybe they want to get a down tier. Maybe they don't feel like they have enough depth on their roster, whether that's in their starting lineup or on the bench, and they want to trade one of their higher valued pieces and try to split that into two different type of assets. Maybe, like a lot of people right now, because it's the offseason and they aren't scoring points, they want youth. They want to get younger for their team. Or maybe there's somebody that actually wants to acquire vets. Maybe they're looking at their team and they really are starting to see it finally for the first time that this team just isn't it. It's not going to be able to compete, and they want to go ahead and turn it in, tear it down, and rebuild for the future, whether that's retooling this offseason, and they want to tear it down and rebuild, whether that's even for a year or two. Try to rebuild this team to be in better position to contend in the future, because they know that there's no way this team has a chance right now. The list goes on and on about what your league mates may want to do with their teams and how they view their teams, but the point is you're going to need to be open and flexible to what your league mates want to do and how they want to maneuver with their team in a trade. Now, even if you don't necessarily have what it takes currently to facilitate a trade with somebody in their realm of what they're trying to do with their team, table that. Put that in notes and make sure that you understand moving forward that if you don't have the quarterbacks to get to this person, let's say that you're in a negotiation with, you don't have excess, make sure you note that for in the future that that's something that they want to have, or there's a player on your specific team that they're looking to acquire. Make sure you note all those things so that in the future you're going to be able to go back and make a trade with that person, because what we're looking to do here, the next big thing that I'm looking to do, and the best way to get this kick started, in my estimation, is really what I call the snowball effect. Now, the snowball effect, if you think of a hill that has snow on it, right? Nothing's happening at the moment. Everything's stagnant. But if you start a very little snowball, you go ahead and make that, and you send it down the hill, while it will be small, one trade initially at the first time. As you do it, it gets rolling down the hill and you get a second trade going. And the snowball that you started at the top versus what you have at the end, we're talking about a massively different size of the snowball. And that's what I'm trying to do. Now, with the snowball in mind, I want to make sure that we get into the next point here, which is understanding that the first trade to get the snowball going and rolling downhill, it may not be exactly what you want to do for your team in the moment, because you're probably going to have to be flexible in making a trade, which is really optimal in trying to fit what someone else is doing with their team. And understand, though, that is just one trade, and you're trying to get a whole process started by doing the snowball effect. So even though this trade may not be exactly how you want it to happen and perfect for your roster, that you don't have to make any more moves, understanding that that is going to be fine, you can take care of that later. But in order to do that, I need to know what the map is. But in order for me to say, okay, I'm going to make a deviation or kind of make a detour, where am I going? So with my team, I kind of want to understand what my team looks like currently and where I want to go with it. Am I a win now team, right? Am I a really strong elite contender? If I have this really strong win now elite team, maybe I'm willing to come off of one of the elite pieces or a middling piece on this team with an effort of picking up value along the way to get back to this elite team that I currently have. Obviously, that's the optimal position you want to be in. Maybe your team's more in the middle of the road with your team currently as it sits. You're looking to just be a contender as far as being in the mix of making the playoffs. And then as the playoffs becomes closer, you'll have a much better indication of what you want to do with your team. Kind of decide then if you want to push your picks in or if you want to sit back if you're going to miss the playoffs and then kind of rebuild. Maybe you're kind of in the middle, but understanding where your team is, or if you're on the outside looking in and you kind of maybe think, this might be a perfect time for me to rebuild or at least try to retool and get younger if I want to try to contend at some point down the future. But I want to understand especially what is my roster construction or what is the optimal thing that I'm trying to do with my team. It's a super flex league. Do I need to have 2 to 3 quarterbacks? How many receivers do I want to have? Is this a scoring format where running backs are a little more prioritized for me in this format than normal? So I care a little bit more about that. What do I kind of want the core of my team to look like at the end of the day? What's at the end of this map? What am I trying to do and build with this team? That's what I kind of want to have at least set for myself as the foundation, because now on the way to getting to this spot, which is my end goal, there's a lot of different routes I can take and I can be flexible to go across all the different paths that my league mates want me to, basically deviating from the normal pathway or map that I have set out for myself, understanding that it's really just a detour and a stop that I'm going to be picking up value along the way in order to get to the end goal at the end of the day. And the best way really to be able to do that, though, is really have a very strong handle on market values and understanding what players really are worth in the trade market, so that when you go out there and start talking to your league mates about what they want, who they want on your team, what they're willing to give you back, being able to really have a good handle on the calculation of any single player or asset in Dynasty in market is huge. Make sure you go back and check out that video in its totality if you need more information about how to really appropriately value things in the market. And the first example of me doing this is actually in a league called Fade the Fetal. I've actually covered the draft of this league as well as me making my first series of trades this offseason, the first 5 trades I made. And I didn't really cover the whole snowball effect and the idea of what I was trying to do as far as a tactic goes, but I did cover the start of breaking down those trades. And before those trades were made, in this league, I was actually having a much similar feeling that RJ Peterson was to this league. And it wasn't anything about the managers in particular. It was more so that I'm looking at my team in this league and I'm saying, man, I kind of have a lot of things that I need to do with this roster. I got Dak at quarterback 1. My quarterback 2 super sketchy with Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson. The running back position, I didn't really have much value at all. I stripped it down to its parts because I finally was not going to make the playoffs last year. I had a whole bunch of cleanup on this team to do. Basically what I'm saying is when I'm looking at this league, right, I knew I had this big project as far as cleaning this team up and making a bunch of trades probably to get it to where it needed to be. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, the activity level in this league, it just isn't likely to lend me the possibility of getting this team cleaned up. But what are you going to do? Sit there and sulk? I had to start trying to throw out offers. And actually, ultimately, the trade that got the snowball started was an incoming trade to me, which at the time, I really wasn't the biggest believer in the player that I'm receiving. So T-Rock in this league, he sends me an offer in for Nico Collins, and I'm supposed to send him back his 25 first and 25 third. And when this offer comes into me, there was a lot of stuff about it that I didn't love at the time. Personally, I thought Nico Collins was an overvalued asset and his value had gotten too high in Dynasty because there was a very good opportunity that they brought in competition around him. At this time, they hadn't made this trade for Stephon Diggs, but lo and behold, that did happen and his value did come down a bit. So I was worried about him being overvalued at the time, as well as in the class of 2025, I had 2 firsts. Basically, when I have picks in clusters in the same class, kind of look at it as a diamond, right? So if you have a diamond, a 1 carat diamond, let's call it, if you have a 1 carat diamond versus you you have a 2-carat diamond, there is a massive difference as far as what a 2-carat diamond's price is versus what a 1-carat diamond's price is, because when I cluster it together, the rarity goes up and the value that I can send to first in a trade for a player gets me in a totally different conversation than just one single pick in the 2025 class. And because it's rare and it is a finite asset in a 12-team league like this, there's only 12 first-round picks. I don't like breaking up my first when I have more than one for a guy that I think is A, overvalued, and also that I don't necessarily think is etched in stone as being a elite player in Dynasty as far as values. Now, as I sat and kind of let this offer marinate, there was two things that primarily led me to accepting this offer and trying to get the snowball going. First was that I don't think that these picks of T-Rocks in 25 at this time were going to appeal to anyone else in the league as much as they were to T-Rock and him getting his flexibility back, as well as at the time, while I didn't love the player of Nico Collins as far as what his value was, I knew that his market value was very high and that there was a very good chance that acquiring him gave me a possibility to flip him in the range of his market value down the road, and ultimately that is doing what? Getting the snowball going if I was able to make another trade with Nico. So I went out on a limb, and even though this wasn't a trade that I would have sent out myself, I accepted this trade with the idea of getting this snowball going because I had so much work to do. Now, part of the inherent risk when trying the snowball method is it's not guaranteed to catch. Just because you make one deal does not guarantee that you're going to get a second deal done and a third deal done. While your effort is to try to get a snowball going, had I, for example, gotten stuck with Nico, I probably don't like the outcome nearly as much as I do now with the snowball effect there, but I knew that that was part of the risk that I was taking on. And if the reality is a 25 first and third, maybe it's a little heavy for Nico, but it's not ridiculously out of the range of outcomes for someone paying a 25 first and third for Nico today. And truth be told, with what I needed to do with my team, if I was to lose out on a third in value or lose that deal a little bit, it was a risk I was willing to take in order to try to see this outcome through. And as I was talking about, circling back to noting things, I had had prior conversations with the CJ Stroud manager who also had Jordan Love. I had Jaden Reed at the time, and I knew he was trying to get Jaden Reed and wanted to acquire this stack of Jaden Reed and Jordan Love. Now that I picked up Nico Collins, I know that he is the CJ Stroud manager in value stacks, so he was the first person in my mind that I was looking to make a trade with, and lo and behold, I ended up getting a deal done pretty quickly, sending Nico now to him for the 104 at the time. Now, not only am I happy with the outcome of these two trades, and whether you think I lost the Nico trade or not, when you combine the Nico trade with the trade that I made at the second trade, I end up with the 104 versus a 25 first and third. And that's where I talk about having to only win 60% of the deals. You don't have to win every single deal that you make. The net overall that you're doing with all the trades is a positive. That's what you should be looking at as a whole. So not only now do I like better the 104 than what I started with in this class, I also have gotten two trades done and the snowball is starting to roll. So now I'm in the office in New York. I make a big trade with Tony where I'm acquiring Jahmyr Gibbs, and ultimately I was really acquiring a running back ahead of schedule of what I would probably like to do on this team. But again, having market values and a handle on that, plus the idea of where I'm going with my team, a top-end running back is something that I would like to acquire if possible down the road when my team is ready to contend. So I made it a little ahead of schedule with the idea of keeping this momentum going. Make the fourth trade where I end up going up from the 106 to the 102. And after I've been the aggressor, or basically the person involved in making the first four trades in the league, there's a fifth trade which goes down in this league that I was not a part of. Then I ended up getting another trade done the next day, which was the sixth trade. And after that, a lot of people at this point were feeling the FOMO, feeling the fact that either my team's getting stronger or they thought that I was losing some trades. They think that other people that I'm making trades with were losing, and they're like, okay, maybe I can make a trade with this person, or I need to address this in my team, because when I'm starting to look and compare myself to other teams in the league, I don't like where I'm sitting anymore. It's not as easy for me to stay stagnant and stay pat with the team that I have. In this first trade, which individually on its merit I was a little hesitant to make, pressing accept and trying to get this snowball going, that one trade turned into a giant snowball of 12 trades, which took place in less than 3 weeks. And 11 of those 12 trades took place in March, and then one of which was in early April. That generically is a dead period in leagues where people aren't as active in trading because the NFL draft isn't here. And when you take a look at what this league has given us in the prior years in trades before May, there was a total of 3 trades made in this league as a whole in 2023 before May. And in 2022, the year prior, there was only 4 trades made in the whole league before May. Go back to 2021, we actually had the startup in June. Compared compared to years past that there was anywhere from 3 to 4 times the amount of trades that took place, and almost everybody in the league was a part of this trade frenzy. Overall, 9 of the 12 teams in the league have made trades, and we've had a total of 19 trades already in the offseason. To give you context again, last year, 2023, of Fade the Fetal, from the start of January all the way through in season as well, there was only 34 trades made. So we're already over halfway through that just right now. So clearly the activity level was kicked up a ton, and this snowball has done a lot for the league as far as activity and engagement. And I want to give you another example that I did last year in 2023 offseason. So this is the OG shit league, the South Harmon League. And in this league, I actually didn't get the snowball effect happening on the first time that it took place as me starting it off. So I made 3 trades here trying to get the snowball going. In this league, I was coming out of a rebuild here, and I wanted to move these picks, a lot of these picks I've acquired, and get into a contending team. And I made a trade with Mike McNutted, co-founder of South Harmon with me. We made a trade in January, Jawan Johnson in a third for Daniel Bellinger. Wasn't a big trade, and it wasn't one that I would make again. Was trying to get it kick-started. Didn't happen. Then you take a look again in February. Made another trade. Didn't happen. Then in March, when we actually have our rookie draft in March, so ahead of the NFL draft, made a trade on the clock, which was the only trade that the league had made during the entire draft. And then all the way through April, basically nothing happened in this league. But in May, when things do typically pick up and there are peaks in trades, pressed my luck again and made a trade on May 18th to acquire CeeDee Lamb, which snowballed into 4 more trades that I made that day. Another group of people made a trade the next day. Then you see a few days later, I made a couple more trades on May 25th. And this snowball really started to pick up, and the activity level did pick up across this league. And even though this snowball happened during more of the peak season for trading, still it kicked up the league activity, and there was more trades made in June and July subsequently. So just because currently your league is in a lull of activity, understanding the timing of dynasty cycles and understanding that sometimes you have to have people see multiple trades go down and kind of get that FOMO effect, keeping up with the Joneses mentality to feel like they need to go make a trade ahead of schedule or when they normally otherwise would not. And I want to talk about with you here, let's even say you're having a hard time getting that first trade made. So what I want to do is give you some ideas if you're struggling to get this kick started. You've gone through and you've had a bunch of either conversations or back and forth offers with people in your league. You've gotten a sense of what they're looking for in their team, and you're still not able to get trades done accordingly after all of this takes place. So one thing that I think you should do, check to make sure that none of your managers in your league have done what we call the auto accept trade block. And basically the auto accept trade block is where you go through and you name all your players, or you give them a nickname, or you put it in league chat somewhere, basically what the value that you would take back in any type of a trade offer for a player. So let's say you go through and you put, Cooper Kupp, any second or 2 seconds for Cooper Kupp, right? You go through CeeDee Lamb, 3 firsts, 4 firsts, whatever the case may be. Now, part of the problem with the auto accept trade block is typically you'll find that someone will put the auto accept trade block out there and the prices they're asking are egregious, and that really doesn't help anybody. But you never know. There's probably some scenarios where if someone does do the auto accept trade block and they give you a list of their players that they will send away for a pick and the prices are reasonable, you may be able to go through and just find a simple one right there, try to get the kickstart going. After you check that, if you don't have the auto accept trade block or you're not able to get a deal done there, you don't like one there, the next thing I like to do is I try to find some players that are, very cheap in Dynasty, especially if you're trying to kickstart it with somebody that doesn't typically make trades. I go through on their roster and see, all right, what are some players that are very likely for them to try to get off of? Try to send an offer out there where you're sending away a 4th or a 3rd again for a player that you're willing to take on. And although this isn't exactly the type of deal that you'd probably like to make, it's one that's kind of negligible and the pieces are ancillary. And the whole idea is not that you would love to make this trade, but that you're doing it to get the ball rolling, right? You get one trade out there, and then there may be discourse and conversation that takes place in league chat. It might be more DMs, and a trade offer may come to you from someone else, which gets conversation going. The whole idea is this trade isn't really one that you're trying to win right now, but you're basically trying to send a small trade out there to almost try to manipulate the market and get everyone in your league paying attention to league chat, seeing the notification in Sleeper, and start getting that activity level up in your league just off of a simple trade, which realistically is ancillary for you and isn't really a part of what you're trying to do with your team in the bigger picture. And especially in a league that you're trying to get the activity going up and you're trying to get the snowball effect going, when offers come into you, ones that you would probably just immediately hit reject and say, I don't want this deal, go ahead and think through it a little more. Make sure that there isn't another angle in which maybe you do want to take this deal. Maybe this would be beneficial for you in a bigger overall process to get where you're going, not necessarily just on the merit of one trade. So whether that's from a manager that normally annoys you and you know realistically what they're trying to do and what they're trying to get out of it, understand that you're trying to just get one trade going. So maybe an offer comes in that you would normally just hit reject and it's annoying to you, but maybe this time you say, all right, let me send a counter back. Try to be a little more proactive in doing what's necessary with counters, discussions, and DMs, and make sure that there isn't a way in which these trade offers that are coming into you, even if it's from managers that are not actually inactive, make sure that those type of trades that you explore every option and try to get a deal done, hit accept on one. So again, that the whole league has to go through and take a look at that trade, and you might have an opportunity to get managers which are seemingly inactive, more active in the league because there's deals happening. Wanted to just go over this with you lastly. Make sure you're having reasonable expectations about what's taking place in your league. We're just coming out of a huge trade activity window, realistically in that late April and May time in your league. And make sure that just because trades aren't happening in mass quantities in June and July, that's not skewing the way that you're viewing your league and activity. Again, understand that not every single trade that you make, even if you're trying to snowball during a dead period, is also going to pick up a snowball effect. Understand that when you make that trade, there is no guarantee that you're going to have a second and third suitor, but the idea is to try to get that into effect. And also, just from my own personal experience, even in the best and most active leagues that I've played in, across a lot of different leagues in Dynasty, and whether that's 12 or 14 team leagues, there is almost always a handful of teams, 2, 3, 4 teams in the league. Even in highly active leagues, those teams are not as active or don't make nearly as many trades. Even if they are responsive, maybe they just aren't really a highly active trader, or they're not a mass trader. And I think kind of understanding that is more of the reality, and that if you are in a league with 12 managers, let's say, and all 12 of them are highly active, always engaging, and all of them are making mass amounts of trades, you are in a very, very small exception to what the reality is in a dynasty league. Almost all leagues are not going to have that type of level of activity, even though we do want that, understanding that's not a realistic expectation to get 12 managers in a league that are all high volume traders. And while you do need to have that realistic expectation that you're unlikely to get 12 people to trade at a very high clip in a league, one thing that I do want you to have as a takeaway: if in a dynasty league, the majority of people are active and making trades, and you have that high level of activity and high trades going on in the majority of the league, and if that level of activity keeps up over time, typically, 1, 2, 3 of the managers who are less active as far as trading, they will start to blend in and start to make more trades than they have in the past. Maybe they don't become high volume traders, but they're making trades on a more frequent basis than they normally would in the past. So that typically will tend to happen, as well as at times there will be some people that maybe they just don't really make a lot of trades, or they're not nearly as into the league as everybody else. And over time, whether that's a year or two, maybe they realize that they don't want to be a part of the league, and that's nothing against them, so they bow out. And while we don't like to have orphans in Dynasty, sometimes it's necessary to get a manager out of there that realistically doesn't fit the league activity and isn't going to be as active as you'd like. So when they bow out, you find a manager to take over that team is going to take a lot better care of this team in the league and be more active and kind of fit the rest of the pack. And also just understanding there are plenty of dynasty managers out there that are participating. They are a part of the league. They will respond to trade offers and requests and be engaging in the league, but they're just low volume traders. And it's okay to have some of those players in your league, and that doesn't have to ruin the league for everybody else. Kind of setting the expectation that if the majority of your league is trading, not everybody, that does make up a very good and active league. And it's okay and healthy to have some people that only make a handful of trades throughout an entire year, and that not everyone in your league is impulsive and wanting to make trades in these crazy dead periods. But that's all I got. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. Did you like this format? Do you like talking about some of the strategy and psychology of leagues on a deeper level? Let me know what you thought of this down in the comments. And if you do want to get the activity picked up and kicked up in some of your league, try the snowball effect, and I hope it works out for you. We'll see you back here, same time, same place, next week, talking more dynasty strategy and trades. I'm out of here. Peace.